So how does the little guy actually beat the giant? You know, the classic underdog story. Well, about 2,500 years ago, one of the greatest military minds in history, Sun Tzu, found himself facing that exact impossible challenge. He had to take on a superpower with a small, frankly, exhausted army.
All right, let's set the scene. The year is 512 BC. You've got the state of Wu, a smaller regional power, and they decide they want to take on their neighbor, the absolutely colossal state of Chu. And, on paper, this looked less like a war and more like a suicide mission.
And wow, this slide just lays it all out, doesn't it? The sheer imbalance is crazy. Over here, you have the state of Wu. Not a lot of land, not a huge population, and their army is just plain tired from fighting other wars. And on the other side, the state of Chu was a behemoth. We're talking way more land, way more people, and a seriously tough, battle-hardened army. A direct head-on fight, that would have been an absolute disaster for Wu.
So this is the big question, right? This is the core of our entire explainer. When you are just completely outmatched, when you're facing overwhelming force, how can the weak possibly hope to defeat the strong? This was the giant strategic puzzle that Wu's brand new general, Sun Tzu, had to figure out.
Sun Tzu's answer was just genius in its simplicity. He basically said, you don't. You don't meet their strength with your strength. No. Instead, you just change the rules of the game. He came up with this radical strategy that wasn't built on force at all, but on deception, on patience, and on psychological warfare.
At the very heart of his plan was this principle, Yo Di Xing Lun. It means lure the enemy and create chaos. See, the idea wasn't to overpower Chu, it was to systematically get them to defeat themselves. Sun Tzu's goal was to create so much disorder, so much confusion, that Chu's greatest strength, that massive army, would actually become its biggest liability.
And he laid out 4 very specific tactics to stir up all this chaos. These 4 principles would become the building blocks for one of the most brilliant military campaigns in history. Because they don't just attack the enemy on the battlefield, they attack them in their minds. And they attack their very ability to work together as a single unit.
Okay, so let's really dig into these chaos tactics. It helps to think of them in 2 distinct groups. The first 2 are all about psychological disruption, and the second 2, they focus on physical disruption. First up, the psychological attack. Using nuer naoji, you anger and disrupt them. You get in their heads, you provoke their generals, you make them so furious that they start making rash emotional mistakes. Then, you use bei'er jiaji, you humble yourself to make them arrogant. You act weak, you pretend you're no big deal, all to pump up their ego until they get overconfident and totally underestimate you. It's literally turning their own emotions into weapons against them.
Okay, next is the physical attack. The principle of Yi or Lao Ji means to tire them out when they're rested. This is a strategy of pure exhaustion. You never give the enemy a moment of peace. You force their well-rested troops to march endlessly after ghosts. And Qin Li Shi? That's about dividing them when they're united. You go after their strategic foundation, using diplomacy, maybe a little espionage, to shatter their alliances. You leave them totally isolated and vulnerable.
So the whole point of all of this, of all 4 of these tactics, is to work toward one single goal, to transform the enemy's strength, their shi, into weakness, or shu. You're just systematically chipping away at every single advantage they think they have, until that mighty superpower is nothing but a hollow shell, just waiting to collapse.
But hey, this wasn't just some cool idea on a scroll. Let's get into how Sun Tzu, along with his ally Wu Zixu, put this entire philosophy into practice with an absolutely devastating 6-year-long campaign against the state of Chu.
Their plan was this 2-step masterpiece of strategic patience. First up, the harassment phase. They split the Wu army into 3 divisions that worked in rotation. So one division would attack a Chu border town. The second the main Chu army mobilized to go fight them, that Wu division would just disappear, and another one would pop up to attack somewhere else entirely. This forced the massive Chu army into a state of constant, exhausting, and totally pointless marching. Only after years of this would they finally move to step 2, the final decisive blow.
Now this is the part that just blows my mind. The time scale. This wasn't a trick they pulled off in a week or a month. This strategy of harassment, of tiring the enemy, of making them complacent, it unfolded over 6 long years. That required an incredible level of discipline and patience from the entire state of Wu.
And here's how it all came together. It all starts in 512 BC with Sun Tzu wisely telling his king, hey, we gotta wait.
Then, for the next 6 years, they execute that tiring the rested tactic, just relentlessly harassing the Chu army. After years of this game of cat and mouse, Chu's commanders got sloppy, complacent. Then, in 506 BC, Wu executes dividing the united. They make an alliance with two of Chu's unhappy neighbors, Kai and Tong. This gave them a backdoor into Chu territory, and that winter, they used it. The final flanking attack at the Battle of Boju was a complete and total surprise, and it caused the entire Chu army to just collapse.
So, what's the ultimate lesson here? What can we take away from this incredible military achievement? Well, it's not just about being clever or using tricks. It's about a much, much deeper strategic virtue.
Real strategic success is rarely a single, brilliant move. It's almost always the result of long-term, patient, and really detailed work. You know, victory isn't achieved in some flash of genius. It's cultivated over time, one meticulous step after another.
There's this wonderful proverb that just captures the idea perfectly. Xing ji qi bu liao red tang yan. Basically, haste can't bring you hot soup. If you rush, you're just going to get burned. Sun Tzu understood that to pull off something this monumental, he couldn't rush it. He had to wait for the soup to cool.
And this brings us to a final thought for today. I mean, we live in a world that demands instant results, right? Quarterly returns, immediate success, everything now, now, now. But Sun Tzu's 2,500-year-old victory teaches us about the profound power of patience. So the question is, in our own lives, whether we're building a business, learning a new skill, or just chasing a long-term goal, where can we achieve more? Not by rushing, but by patiently and strategically waiting for the soup to cool.